Let's get started. OH?
Sure. So as the non-academic here, and the judge did a really good job of teeing up the landscape, but I think in order to talk about the future of climate litigation, it's really important to understand what we're talking about with climate litigation. And I think, that starts with the idea that this is litigation to accomplish a policy outcome. All of this is shaped around the goals of what the policy outcome is, and then you can almost work backwards. And I think it's also important to understand that climate litigation, at least from my consumer group's perspective, it's just a very large silo in a broader campaign of woke lawfare that is a campaign designed to reshape the products on the shelves around you, the choices you're allowed to make, and the way that you're allowed to live, to shape it to a particular type of lifestyle. And that the courtroom is a really powerful way to do that. This is a really big vertical within that space, and I think it's important to place climate litigation in that vertical because it starts to give you an understanding of what the goals are, and you can't understand how something's going to end if you don't talk about the goals. Now, within that vertical, that silo, you have a lot of components, and the judge talked about some of them, but I want to just lay them out in pieces because I think when you actually look at them all laid out on a table in front of you, and then you talk about the goals, it all starts to become clearer, and you start to understand what the motivation is, and that helps you understand what the likely results are going to be. So you've got the public nuisance cases, whether it's Boulder or Honolulu, cases out of these jurisdictions that are seeking to basically use climate change as a nuisance to then accomplish the unlocking of vast sums of money or vast policy changes through a courtroom action. You also have consumer cases that have come after that out of places like Massachusetts that are much more on the monetary side, but they want to put lots of language on disclaimers about selling any sort of product in the fossil fuel space. Then you have this kind of land use and retroactive permitting and trespass concepts. I think the key exemplar of that is the Plaquemine Parish case out of Louisiana, which is a case that's a multi-billion-dollar case that's currently before the U.S. Supreme Court on a removal question. It's a really important question. But that's a case that's just a massive monetary tool, right, that also comes with some amount of please rip up everything that is in the ground in Louisiana and make it like it wasn't there, right? So it's not a nuisance case, but it's accomplishing many of the same goals. And then you have the climate kids cases or the Juliana case, which is claiming a right to a certain type of climate. And then you're starting to get this new frame of these climate superfund cases. And then on the very edge of this, you're starting to see the very first climate homicide cases, right? When you look at all those, you think like these are all like different ways of questioning aspects of climate change. But I think you need to just ask like what are the two common themes that roll through this? And I think it's unlocking money for preferred policy outcomes and shutting off behavior that you would prefer to be able to ban through legislative means. And each of these cases is doing these two things almost like a dial in different quotients, okay? And if you want to think that maybe I'm just a bit too strident, which sometimes I'm accused of being, David Bookbinder, who's one of the litigants in this space, was doing a FedSoc event recently on October 8th and was talking about how the two outcomes that he was discussing were a carbon tax and bankruptcy. Now, everybody in the media space has talked about the carbon tax part of this, and that just feels like you're unlocking money for policy priorities that you want. But I really want everyone to focus their minds on the second thing that he said. I think I've got this quote right. If not, it's close, it's at least inspired by true events. You go into bankruptcy, in the bankruptcy court, its job is to make sure that the assets are then used for the benefit of the creditors. Okay, but what are the creditors he's talking about? They're Boulder, Honolulu, they are Oakland. He's basically describing how the end goal of this is ultimately you impose enough liability that you're able to take control through the bankruptcy process and hand over an entire section of an industry that you don't really like into the hands of municipal governments, local governments that are primarily on one side of the aisle versus the other, right? If you tried to do this through other means, people would start to say that, it was potentially a taking, or you can't do that, or you have to pay money for it. But this is basically a capture mechanism. And I think from our perspective as a consumer group, when you understand that the goals are liability and money to eventually force somebody into bankruptcy so that you can then control the levers that they are using for production and basically capture the means of production here, that should inform everything about how these cases are approached, how litigation is approached, how policy is approached, and it starts to get at why you're starting to see a lot more aggressive action by some states like West Virginia, because they're starting to see this as this is only going to stop if we take more aggressive legal action. Otherwise, we're going to lose control of the energy within our state, because the private actors will suddenly become publicly owned by Oakland and Honolulu, and I'm not sure that the people of Oakland and Honolulu know so much about West Virginia or frankly care so much about West Virginia consumers. And so I think that when I talk about this, and I'll try to end with this, it's just that's the landscape. All of these pieces look disparate. Their common bond isn't that they're about the climate. Their common bond is that they are liability vehicles to accomplish the ultimate bankruptcy / taking of the industry and then controlling what people can buy. And the last part I'll say is I struggle sometimes when a lot of this is discussed solely in the climate space. That's why I say that it's part of a woke lawfare campaign. It's not about gas going into your car, okay? That's important. It's not about petroleum byproducts and plastics. All of these cases start with big energy companies, but all of the analysis and legal theory from a consumer's perspective is going to apply to your public utility. It's going to apply to the car company that makes the cars that you want to buy, and it rolls all the way downhill. And these are things that people are, it affects their shelves, and it affects what's going to come into their home in terms of energy and heat and cooling. And these are things that we've just experienced with the last presidential administration. They get people pretty excited because they affect you every single day, day in and day out. And so we just ask everyone to think a little bit broader and think about the end goals, because once you see the end goals, it starts to make you have a lot more questions, I think, about the tools that are getting you toward those end goals and how you're going to be grappling with antagonists here. Because once you grasp what their goals are, if you don't do that, I don't think you can reasonably predict the future.
Thank you. Professor Adler.
Thank you.